So the great thing about horror games is that each of them are terrifying in their own way. From psychological horror to survival horror, there's really a ton of subgenres out there that each keep us up at night with their unique storytelling and gameplay mechanics. But one major factor in storytelling for horror games are the characters. More specifically, the type of characters that really give us goosebumps each time they are on screen. And ever since I saw The Shining as a kid, specifically twins in horror games just creep me the fuck out. So on this episode of Nerd Space Games, I'm taking a look at all of the twins in horror games. Whether they are ghosts, murder victims, or psychos, even if they are actually good people on paper, for one reason or another, each of these pair of twins rubbed us the wrong way enough to earn themselves a spot on today's list. Also, before we get started with today's video, I do want to give you guys a quick spoiler warning for some of the horror games that we'll be covering on today's video. But don't worry, there are timestamps that'll allow you to skip to the next entry if I start talking about a game that you just don't want to be spoiled on. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerd Space Games, and this is my top 10 creepiest twins in horror games. Let's get it. Number 10, Emma and Anna, Tormented Souls. As I said earlier at the start of today's video, we'll be diving into some spoilers regarding horror games. And of those horror games, Tormented Souls is the most recent entry on today's list as it was released about 3 years ago. Anyway, the main plot of Tormented Souls focuses on two twin girls, Anna and Emma Wildberger. The main character, Caroline Walker, comes to Wildberger Mansion in search of these missing twin girls. But it's revealed later on in the story that Caroline is in fact a fully grown Emma Wildberger, and her sister Anna has been trapped in the mansion for all of these years. After tons of experiments and operations, Anna becomes a demonic ghost-like creature that begins chasing Caroline throughout the halls of the mansion. To be fair, Anna is the main twin here that's creepy as fuck. But Emma as Caroline has her moments too. For example, at one point she literally cuts out her own eyeball just to enter the underground chambers later on in the game. It's not as drastic as it sounds, but to go into full detail about how she accomplished this would literally take up an entire video. Overall, Emma is more of a badass protagonist that's intimidating, while Anna is the true horrifying sister that'll keep you up at night with her ghoulish cries as she chases you throughout the Wildberger mansion. Number 9, Aya and Maya, Parasite Eve. Now to be fair, Maya Brea is technically already dead by the time the game starts, as she died 20 years prior to the events of the game. Well, sort of. Long story short, the Brea twins were in a car accident when they were young. Unfortunately, both Maya and her mother didn't survive the wreck, making Aya Brea the only survivor of the incident. However, their mother made them organ donors, and therefore Maya Brea's kidney was given to another young girl at the time, and her name was Melissa Pierce. Later, it's revealed that Eve planned this by possessing Maya's mother in an effort to create a second Eve, basically reincarnating her. Therefore, the main antagonist, Eve and Parasite Eve, is actually a version of Aya's twin sister, Maya. You with me so far? Because I know that's kind of a lot. So with that in mind, both Eve aka Maya and Aya Brea have caused some truly terrifying moments in Parasite Eve. For Eve, hers is a little more in your face. In her case, she basically lit the entire audience of a show on fire and turned another large group of people at Central Park into some weird brown goo. Not to mention she gives birth to this abomination. Unfortunately, all of the creepiness of the Brea twins doesn't only fall on Maya. Aya Brea, despite being the main character of the game, has her fair share of creepy moments. For one, she has powers, which on its own is kinda terrifying considering that there was always a fear that she could have a similar fate as her sister and become another version of Eve. However, the creepiest moment for Aya is actually in the final moments of the game. While it's not fully addressed in future games, it appears that Aya's powers have improved and she had some sort of mind control over the audience members in the show at the end of the game. Number 8, Isaach and Isaiah, Deadly Premonition. Although these boys are fairly innocent and sweet compared to most entries on this list, that doesn't mean that they don't give off creepy ass vibes every time they are on screen. Isaach and Isaiah are the ones to find Anna's body at the start of the game. However, it's revealed fairly early on that these boys could potentially see ghosts, as it seemed like they saw Anna moving around in the forest even though she was dead. Also, despite their age, these kids are actually pretty smart and are probably one of the more intelligent characters in this game. However, the whole seeing dead people thing is only one of the reasons why these kids are pretty high up there on the creepy factor. The way they present themselves throughout the game, with each of them whispering to each other before they actually respond to the player in conversations, is another creepy trait that they have. For whatever reason, perhaps because they are the most intelligent characters in the game, or just because they found Anna's body first. But the player interacts with them specifically in the Red Room. Here they are depicted as angels, despite the odd sounds that they make as you're exploring the room. The other moment of creepiness with these kids comes from when they go insane thanks to the purple fog. This leads them to go ballistic and stab an agent in the back with a pair of scissors. Number 7. Edwin and Enoch, Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs. Of the 4 Amnesia games, A Machine for Pigs is probably the least scary of them all. Hell, in my opinion, it's the weakest game of the franchise. With that being said, there was one element of the game that added a little uneasiness throughout the experience. That, of course, was the ghostly presence of the Mandus twins, Edwin and Enoch. From the very moment they were introduced during the early parts of the story, Edwin and Enoch's creepy laughs as they ran from room to room was enough to make us all nervous. They'll pop up as some sort of hallucination at the most inconvenient times to throw us off of our games as we try to unravel the mystery of A Machine for Pigs. From the start, I feel like we were all aware of their fate. Although, I gotta admit, I didn't expect it to be as gruesome as it's revealed to be later on. Yeah, that's because the ending of the game reveals that Mandus, their father, saw the future in which he saw that they both suffered greatly during the World War. With that in mind, he thought it would be best to kill them himself and save them from such suffering. Yeah, that's Father of the Year right there, my friends. Because of that, it's not really that surprising that the ghosts of these twins continue to haunt Mandus throughout the entire game.
Daddy, Daddy, find us!
Number 6. Alfred and Alexia, Resident Evil, Code Veronica. Code Veronica followed Claire Redfield as she searched for her brother on Rockford Island, an Umbrella training facility and prison camp. During her search, she is captured and locked up until the island is attacked by the Wildberger. Still, despite the most iconic villain of the franchise appearing in this game, he's actually not the main antagonist of Code Veronica. Instead, that title goes to the Ashford twins. During the first half of the game, we are tricked into believing that both Alexia and Alfred are on the island as they are hunting down Claire and Steve. However, as the two are escaping the island, it's revealed that Alfred has a split personality in which Alfred and Alexia are actually the same person. Well, sort of. After tormenting the two until they escape the island, Alfred forces them to Antarctica, in which they crash land into an Umbrella base. After one final confrontation with Alfred, he's fatally injured and dies at the foot of the real Alexia Ashford. Here, Alexia has become the superior being that she set out to become all of those years ago. In this form, she's able to take on Wildberger himself and manipulate giant vines and even fire that comes from her own blood. Both of these twins are terrifying in their own right as they continue to torment Claire, Steve, and Chris Redfield throughout the events of the game until they are both eventually killed by our heroes. Still, probably the creepiest scene with these two definitely comes from that weird ass scene with the music box. Number 5. Mio and Mayu, Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly. Considering that the main plot of Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly centers around twins meeting a grim fate, it really shouldn't come to any surprise that the game would be featured on this list. And hell, it may not be the last time that we see this game appear on today's list. Regardless, the main characters of Fatal Frame 2 are Mio and Mayu, twin sisters that find themselves trapped in a ghost village called Minakami Village. Throughout the game, we primarily play as Mio as she continues to follow her twin sister in order to rescue her and get her out of the village safely before one of the ghosts kills them. Unfortunately, things are a lot more complicated than it sounds for these girls. Mayu is in fact being possessed by another twin spirit named Sai. Apparently, Sai and Yai were supposed to be part of a ritual that would require Yai to murder Sai, her own sister. Well, despite Sai wanting to go through with the ritual because it would protect the rest of the village, Yai didn't want to kill her own sister. So they attempted to flee. While running away, Sai pretended to get injured and fall in order to allow both her and Yai to get caught. However, things didn't go according to plan as Yai didn't come back for Sai and Sai was caught by the villagers. Fearing that the curse would befall the villagers killed Sai themselves and sacrificed her only for it to lead to a vengeful ghost of Sai murdering the entire village. So when Mio and Mayu found their way into the village, Sai began possessing Mayu throughout parts of the game, which led to some terrifying moments between Mio and Mayu, including a very scary game of hide and seek. Ultimately, this led to the ending, which is one of the most depressing endings I've seen in a horror game. Number 4, Junko and Mukuro, Danganronpa. While most wouldn't consider this game a horror game, I think the concept of a bunch of students trapped in a school by some maniac who forces them to murder each other is a premise that screams horror in my eyes. So with that being said, I've decided to include Danganronpa on this list. And if you know anything about Danganronpa, then you'll know that the twins of that game are without a doubt some of the most vicious and dangerous people seen in video games. Anyway, as I said before, Danganronpa follows a group of high school students as they must unravel who the mastermind is among them. While doing this, they must also participate in class trials as they have to identify which one of them murdered their fellow students. Well, again, spoiler for those that haven't played this game, but it's revealed that the mastermind is Junko Enoshima, which for most of us came to a surprise as Junko was killed in the early parts of the game. Or was she? The Junko that was killed near the start of the game was her twin sister, Mukuro, who basically idolizes Junko and does whatever she wants her to do. The two became known as the Despair Sisters. Junko came up with a master plan that would send the world into complete despair, which ultimately led to the events of the game in which the brightest and most talented students of their respective fields were forced to murder each other. For reasons that Junko chose not to disclose to her twin sister, Mukuro was given the mission of pretending to be Junko Enoshima during the early parts of the killing game. This allowed the real Junko Enoshima to work behind the scenes and ultimately kill her own sister. Because of the events that they caused between the two of them as the Despair Sisters, they definitely deserve a spot on today's list. To go one step farther though, Junko is just completely nuts. Number 3, Billy and Miriam, Silent Hill 4, The Room. One thing that Silent Hill has always been known for is the manifestation of one's fears, guilt, and past by turning these things into horrifying monsters. In Silent Hill 4 The Room, things are slightly different in how these manifestations are created. Instead of being manifested by the protagonist or even the nightmares of a specific character, most of the monsters are actually created from the victims of the main antagonist of the game, Walter Sullivan. See, Sullivan is a murderer whose main motivation is to reunite with his deceased mother. Because of a conversation that he had with Dahlia Gillespie, yeah, that Dahlia, he believed that the only way for him to reunite with her was to perform a ritual that would require a total of 21 sacrifices. So while Walter was alive, he began killing people to meet this quota. Even after he died, his ghost continued these crimes until he sacrificed a total of 19 victims before being stopped by Henry and Eileen. Unfortunately, Billy and Miriam were not spared in time as they were some of Walter's earlier victims when he was still alive. These twin children lived at the same orphanage that Walter grew up in near Silent Hill. It was here where Walter took both of their lives as the 7th and 8th victim for his ritual. Sadly, their tragic story doesn't stop there though. As with many of the victims, the twins came back as a monster that Henry would have to face against multiple times. Unlike most of his victims though, the twins were not ghosts, but instead some sort of conjoined mutant creature that was missing its legs and ran on its hands. Number 2, Mion and Shion, Higurashi, When They Cry. When They Cry reminds me a lot of Doki Doki Literature Club. That's because it's a visual novel that may not seem like a horror game at first, but man does it take a turn for the worse real fast. Essentially, this game is split into multiple different chapters as each one follows a different reality of some sort. The story focuses on a small group of friends inside of a small village. Deeper in the story, we learn of some sort of parasite that increases their paranoia and causes them to go on a bloody rampage that leads to the death of one or more victims. Before that reveal though, we are constantly thrown into different realities in which different characters go on a bloody rampage. And two of the main characters in the story are in fact the twins, Mion and Shion Sonozaki. Mion is the twin sister that's supposed to become the next head of the family, while Shion is sort of the black sheep of the family. However, we definitely get plenty of time with each of these girls going ballistic. Personally, my favorite storyline revolves around Shion's psychotic break. In that story, Shion begins to doubt all of her friends and family as she begins to believe that in some insane way they are all responsible for the man that she loves going missing. So it leads to her locking up her sister and pretending to be her until the point she doesn't need her anymore, and then she kills her. Then she tortures her lover's sister. And then she basically kills almost every single friend that she has because of her paranoia. Yeah, she fucking goes nuts. Mion is no different in these arcs, by the way, as she completely loses it in her own storylines. Both of these girls are just more terrifying than the rest of the cast when it comes to their transformation in these arcs when they become killers in those specific storylines. And the creepiest twins in a horror game goes to Akane and Azami Kiryu from Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly. I told you that Mio and Mayu wouldn't be the last entry on today's list from that game. The Kiryu twins are much more terrifying than Mio and Mayu. Like many others, the Kiryu twins were the Shrine Maidens selected at one point to perform the ritual. However, unlike most of the Shrine Maidens before them, the village was desperate, and because of that, they had to perform the ritual at a much younger age than normal. This is why they are much younger compared to other Shrine Maidens in ghost form like Sai. Sadly, their story doesn't end there. After performing the ritual in which Akane killed her own sister, Akane fell into despair for losing the person closest to her at such a young age by her own hands. In an effort to help her, her father, who was a doll maker, created a doll in Azami's image. Because that totally sounds like a great idea. Well, Akane became obsessed with the doll, believing it to be her actual sister who was trapped in the doll, and ultimately it led to Akane killing her own father. During the main events of the story, as we are searching for the village as Mio, we come across the Kiryu twins in ghost form multiple times. However, as with the doll made by her own father, one of these ghosts is actually a fake and is meant to distract the player while the main ghost sneaks up from behind. This is extremely frustrating as these twin ghosts are both annoying, tragic, and extremely terrifying as they continue to giggle each time they appear and try to attack us. But honestly, it's hard to be upset and mad at these girls when you think about their backstory. Like, damn, that's... Fatal Frame games are no joke when it comes to the backstory of these characters. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Are Akane and Azami Kiryu the creepiest twins in a horror game, or is there another set of twins that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.